with some neighbors. So thank you to Shevik for coming in and District 10 for allowing us to use this room. And hopefully you saw it in either newsletters or on Facebook. We tried to spread it out to let people know about some of the cool things going on in the neighborhood. But the project started, again, I'm Laura Oyen and I live in Subdistrict 1, which is up by Linglumston Nursing Home. And lived in the neighborhood since 1988. My husband, who's standing at the door over there, his grandparents lived over on West Arlington and from the 40s on. So we both have sort of connections to the neighborhood that way. And both kind of like history and genealogy and going down rabbit holes. I'm a really fan of maps. And we have another map person here, Jim, who brought in some of his collection. So we'll kind of go through the presentation today about house history. And then feel free to look at the maps. We have Darlene, who wrote one wonderful family story about the Coonsey farm. And she has a book back there that her dad put together. And and I put some other random miscellaneous stories that I've been finding as I've been just doing my digging in the history of the Como neighborhood. But we all have maybe lived here a short time or a long time, but so much of the neighborhood is evolves around the park and the state fair. But there's so much history in the blocks and the housing and the type of institutions that are in between and the farming that was in this area that we thought, let's try and collect and save the stories. And a really nice way to do that is by community members telling the story of their house or their family history, or if they're an immigrant to the neighborhood, their story of how they ended up in the Como neighborhood, because many immigrants started here. It's hooked to the railroad tracks and lots of things like that. So I think we are recording this just so we can practice and see how it's going. We didn't put it on Zoom because I'm just winging it kind of a little bit with the presentation. So it's showing you the resources I found or other community members have found and shared, and ways to get to this. So much of this now you can get to online, but we'll show you the places to get to it online. Plus, after this is done, we'll post it out on the District 10 website for so you can click on the links and go out and do your own exploring. Before I get started, any questions or any other things you want to know about the project? Thanks for the coffee from our new vendor on Dale. So that was great. Any questions? All right, we'll jump in. So thanks again for coming. Really appreciate it. So this District 10 Como Neighborhood History Project kind of started out with these 4 goals. The ones we're kind of focusing on right now are the ones in red: collecting oral histories, research stories. We're putting everything on the Know Your Como platform. It's a person, place, or thing. If you think there's something interesting, like the submarine or something in your neighborhood or a store, go ahead and write it up, do the research, send it in. Community-driven project. And then here we're holding an informed community conversation. And that's what we're hoping is that, you know, people who like history, maybe we meet once a month and talk about what we've learned or figured out or get pointers. It might be kind of a little ongoing informal group, something like that. So go ahead, Shevik, to the next one. Again, here are our sub-districts that we have. So this is between the fairgrounds. Here's around Como Park. We have on Dale, and then between the railroad tracks is sub-district 4. Go ahead to the next one then. Again, a plug for our District 10 website and the Know Your Como platform. So different stories are out there. Community members are all welcome to all the committee meetings, the D10 board, Know Your Como stories, and the newsletter that comes out every Friday if you want to get it directly, or many people get it through their block club person sending it out, but you can always sign up at the bottom of the D10 website to get your own newsletter directly to your inbox. These are some of the things we're going to go over today. Any personal home documents that you have. We're going to look at the recorder's office, building permits, a lot of maps online, talk a little bit about the SHPO office, city directories, newspapers from Minnesota Historical Society, probate records from there, and then land patents for the Bureau of Land Management. And then there's a few other resources we'll go to after that. Go ahead. So digging right in, I'm showing things that are in when I dug into our house. Our house was built in 1962, but it was owned by people who lived right next door to us, and their house was built in 1924. So they had a double lot, and then one of their children ended up purchasing from the family or was deeded the land right next door. So on our particular block, we have houses that range from 1888 to 1974 or even 84, I think, on just walking around a block. And I thought that was very odd. Some blocks in the District 2 area, they're all built in 1940s, 50s, something like that. But being such a variety of ages and time, I was just really surprised at the houses. So I have, when we bought our house in 88, we received this abstract. How many of you guys have an abstract that you have? That's really handy to look at. And this is the first page of our abstract. And it was originally entered in 1850 when William Marshall bought this land in this area. And so I learned, really just Google William Marshall. I found out he was a governor of the state. There's a little sheet back there that talks about him, but I thought it was really interesting. How did he get here? I talked a little bit about his background. And when you start seeing names going through this, those are the stories that, like, how did they get here? Why did they get here? And so you can really go into rabbit holes of individual stories on it. The other piece we have is down here. We have this Edward Libby, but Priscilla, they say Sibley there, but her name was actually Libby, so there's a typo. So you'll find when you're going through documents, there might be typos, there might be address changes on streets. But this Priscilla Libby lived there, according to this affidavit. He knew her more than 20 years living in this area. So I haven't dug too much into her yet, but a couple of Google searches, there's some things that popped up pretty quickly about her. But when you open this, all of these entries, whether they're the warranty deed or affidavits, warranty deeds, they present a story of who owned the land. Everything starts from the land going up and then working your way to who put the buildings on it. Did the building change on it? Did the street names change? So we're starting from ground up. Thus, the maps are really handy from that. So any quick questions on abstracts? Or there are some things called Torrens and meets and bounds surveys that are a little bit over my head, but there are people that we'll get to at the recorder's office that can help with some of that stuff. So go ahead to the next slide. Thus, the Ramsey County Recorder's Office, again, online public records. So you can access a lot of documents there. Here is their location. They have computers in like a side room that you can sit at, and they can help you dig through if you don't have a full abstract.
Will the
Links in the
all this be available
online? Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay,
if
so
you
we
just
don't
want
need
to
to make
link,
it-
yep, you don't have to make it down. We'll get it all online, and so you can click, because there are so many links now that I didn't want to print out a page because you couldn't get the link, but we'll put it up in the next week. We'll get it on the website. So hopefully you can just like absorb right now and then go through it.
So the documents are all available for review, you don't have to pay for review or?
there is, see this one, the online access to it, that one you have to pay, and I think it's geared more to like real estate agents or title people or different things like that. So given I was focused on a certain area, I just went down there and started talking to them, or you could call and send them an email, and they could help. But yeah, the online access is a pay per page. There are some copy things too that you might have to pay for it, but they can let you know some of that stuff as you start exploring on your own. We did start this whole conversation based on some racial covenants, and they do have instructions out there now on how you can, if you have a racial covenant on your property, which might be in every area in the Frankston edition north of Midway Parkway. Most of those have racial covenants. They're not enforceable at all, but if you feel a social obligation or duty and want to remove it, there's a process here. We might do something later on in the spring, maybe a workshop if people are interested, that maybe we all do it together as a community project to do it, but we'll plan that out if people are interested going farther. So go ahead to the next one. When I click on these links here, these are the things I typically look up: property tax value, there's maps and surveys, and discharging racial covenants that are there. There's a whole bunch of other links and clicks and lots of information. So it is kind of a, I spend a lot of time to watch football games or bad television. So I have my laptop on my lap and I do this while I'm watching that stuff. So it's a multiple thing.
If you don't have an abstract for your property, can you get one through the portal?
I think you can work your way through that and talk to them about it. They can make copies, and there's different processes to it. I did have mine to start with, so that helped, but I was looking for properties that were on the block, and I don't own any of those properties, but I'm looking into that, and I think there are ways to get it. If you have friends with anyone who works at a title company, they might be able to point you in some directions too, for something like that, so. Yeah.
I do know, I went to the recorder's office, back, I think it was in August, did some research on, the house that I have. And I'm in sub-district 1. The house was built like in the 20s. But the only computerized records that they had for, deeds only went back to the 1990s. Everything else was on microfilm and microfiche.
Yep.
So it required someone from the recorder's office actually to go into this room with me. And the guy was really great. He spent over an hour with me tracing and trying to get all these names. But I guess I mentioned it because don't expect to find a lot of information online. There's a lot of history that is.
Yeah, the details won't help you so much if, like, my idea is to do a history of just our block, and if you just want to know some information on the block, you get bits and pieces. I do know from talking to a title person, Hennepin County has much more scanned online and things like that. Ramsey County does not. So it'll be more of a fun adventure rabbit hole thing. And again, maybe if there's, we've been talking a little bit with the Ramsey County Historical Society. So they were talking about possibly opening up, if you want to go down and have a group day to go through that they might open up something special. Maybe we could figure out a field trip if people are interested to the recorder's office too. These are all just ideas based on people's interest, people's time, willingness to help plan, set it up. So we're just kind of, again, community-based project. We're doing what we can do. So, yep.
Are there any resources, I mean, not only on house history, but street history and?
We are getting to that. Yep. Excellent question. So we'll move to the next one. So here's a quick thing of what I do go into, especially when I was looking in the block, is you can click down and you can click on a house through a map. There's some map search there. There's aerial views by just clicking and highlighting those different boxes. there's GIS information, and you can see the aerial view from 3 different years that are listed there. This is our property. If you click on this property value, it will pop up a sub little thing here that tells you the style of the house, the year it was built. This is kind of a combination between our house and the next door house that I told you the properties were combined. So I know it just gives you a little bit of information, especially the date of the house. Mapping Prejudice has a time lapse of all the racial covenants that pop up on a map, so you can see which homes in Ramsey County have racial covenants on it. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to have, see if we can get a pop-up map based on when houses were built to show this area as farmland, which is like 6 houses, and then over time have them all pop up. Again, we'll see if we can reach out. I thought that'd be kind of a cute visual for the neighborhood over time. So another thing to work on as we do this. Another thing, we're gonna flip to building permits. This can give you a little bit of information too about the house. And I picked this one here because this, again, when I'm looking at this one block that I've been looking at, just, you know, walking the dog around the block, like what was there and what's going on? Well, on Almond Avenue here, there's a duplex, and it tells us this house was moved from 290 North Snelling. So I'm like, I thought that was pretty impressive. And then we did some oral histories too, that you may have seen the story map that we put on the website about the oral histories. And one of the women we talked to remembers when that house was moved, and you know, all the neighbors came out and saw it moving down the street. And so if it was 290 North Snelling, it was just kind of on the other side of 94 in Snelling. There's a dermatology office there right now. So for some reason, you know, that was more housing, but maybe when 94 came in, or the year it would have been moved, it looks like 1969, the building date on there. And everything seems to have been done in 1969. So that's probably when it was moved. So it may have had some relation to 94 going through there, but I just thought it was interesting. Why did that house move here? I don't know, but there's a you know, a rabbit hole that anyone can go down there. So go ahead and go to the next one. Here's another one, just a few blocks away. It was the Lake Park Baptist Church, but what I did is I just looked up the address, 1220 Haskell, down at the Ramsey County Historical Society, because it's a church. It's an old church, but now it's a family home there. So how did it go from a church to a family home? Type in the address, find out that's the name. Lake Park Baptist was the church. That's when it was built. There's, you know, some information there. Now I have a name. I have a name of what it was originally. Type the name into the Minnesota Historical Society. They have a picture. I haven't clicked on that picture yet, but in the online, that's at the Historical Society. They have a picture of it. And then again, searching through newspapers, I typed in the name again, popped up this little story that I thought that was so interesting about the pastor of Mount Olive Baptist Church at McEwen and Central. They're going to exchange pulpits with the Lake Park Baptist Church. So one of their exchanging, I think, between black pastors and white pastors were church exchanges of the churches one day a year. And so this little story talked about the Brotherhood Day observance. So in just playing around, you know, getting a name from an address, little different things pop up. Go ahead and go to the next one. Maps. We have lots and lots of fun maps online. All of these are, I think if you hovered over it, it might be a link to hop through there. But there's lots of, okay, they might not work now, but
It's screen share stuff.
yeah. So, but these will be links to go to the John Borchert Map Library at the University of Minnesota. All of these places too are open to go in, and if you like maps, dig around, look around. It's it can be a fun adventure on, a day that instead of sitting in your house doing something or going to the Rosedale, you can go down and look at maps at the U of M. It's kind of a fun field trip. One of the maps I put here is a Sandburn map, has a little different look than some of these other maps here, the plat maps that are around. But they go a little bit more current. You'll find here's that Lake Park Baptist Church right here. You'll see right here are 2 houses and 2 vacant lots right there. This is part of the Child's Edition. And I think our lot is right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 5 is going the other way. So this is where our house is. That was where the neighbors. So this lot hadn't been built in until 62. Here is the Booth Brown home is there and other churches. And so you kind of see the layout of it, the plan of it. And they sometimes add other bits about the street, like we got Como, Albany, Almond. And up here, this is all Linglumsted area there, but different maps have different looks to them, and you can get different information by looking at the maps. Go ahead and go to the next one. This one is more like the plat maps we have here. And in the back, I also put, there's a 1-page handout of how to read the section, town, and range. If you don't remember any of your 8th grade geography, there's ways that it goes from section and down to different plots through there. And so it always helps to, when you start looking, to know what those are in your thing. But this is that same area with the Child's Edition here. Como used to be Langford. So going back to your question about different names on different streets, by looking at, this map was from 1914. We found that, oh, Langford, Albany, Almond are the same, but Atlantis also is going through there. We see the property, Linglumston Nursing Home was only that one corner up there, but now Linglumston has this whole campus right there. You see how many houses were here and which ones weren't. This is what really got me interested in our block. This is Minnesota Magdalene Association. And you see, like, there are hardly any homes all throughout here, individual people owning. This L. Ewing is one I've been doing an awful lot of research on. You'll also see there that Almond does not go all the way through at this time. So to get to these homes over here, you had to go through the alleyway that we still have, which is maybe Horton. There's a couple different names, you see, had to go through the alley, and this is probably just a gravel road there because this gentleman owns this land. So all of these things are, okay, what was here when? You have Tilden School over there, and the different things that it's like, I've never heard of this name. You get a lot of names for maps that you can start Googling, start researching, digging down. This happened to be, just like the Booth Brown home was a home for unwed mothers that would give birth, and through that, same thing here. It started Union Gospel Mission. There were 4 different owners. It ended up burning down a home in 1961, which is one of the reasons why on our particular block, this whole section of the block has homes that were built in 1961 or earlier. All this housing went up. So we have homes like this one right here. In this area, there's a house that was built in 1888. So why do we have one from 1888, an old farm home, and then down here, all 1962? So just all these little puzzles from having walking around the block for so many years, and like, I wanted to know why. So this map started giving me clues to that. I've done a little research into this, and as soon as we kind of have our neighborhood history project kind of flowing a little bit and people doing stuff, maybe I'll have time to write it up. Because that I think will be an interesting story, but there's so much more to the story.
That's a very interesting area because of all the institutions in that area. There's also a Jewish home for the aged.
Yep,
And there's a,
looks right up here.
I think before the 2000s, on the map back here, it says Salvation Army and Hospital.
Yep,
And you read about that, and the first thing to do is go out and drop a lot more money in that red kettle. They really need to get their story about what they did and the significance of that.
exactly. And actually, this is an interesting part with the maps and the dates and the building permits. This map is 1914. The Booth Brown home was built like in 1912, 1913, something like that, actually more 1913. So this map, either the date might be off, or it took how many years to print, publish, and change, you know, what was going on there. So that, and the same with some of these other name changes on the streets. Some of these dates on a map compared to what you might find in the other documents, you know, they're close, but they might not be perfect just due to printing time or things like that.
Plat maps you have to be careful with because it looks like everything's there. But in fact, the streets may not be graded yet. They're not blacktop, they're not finished yet. So
Yep.
there's this little time period where you have to look at the same map, same area you can find on the 1928 map, and it's a lot different.
Yep, and that's the fun of looking through the maps is layering the years to see what was there. Nothing was there. Oh, except 3 farmhouses, and then you work your way up and it's totally full. So we can move on again here. This is a map too, just to give you an idea of the growth of St. Paul. So St. Paul added different sections at different times. So parts of Como were added in 1873, and then we got 1887, 1885. So again, here was a map that someone presented information to in a visual form versus paragraph after paragraph. And since everyone has different ways that they process information, mapping is a way that you can see patterns in a big way. So go ahead and go to the next one. The University of Minnesota also has aerial photographs online. So again, you'll have a link to the Borchert map library, and that you can, if you are so excited, you want to just go home and do that this afternoon, just type the John Borchert map library and start clicking and looking around. They have a lot of stuff. But what you do, if you click into their historical aerial photographs, you'll see a map, something like this of the whole state. And then once you start zooming in, you can get into just the neighborhood area. And you'll see like these are all little dots like there. And then each one of those dots is a different date of the historical aerial photograph. So we don't, not every dot has a year on it that you can look at. But by looking at different ones in different areas, especially since Como is kind of big, we have the 4 sub-districts. So one map might show your sub-district better than another one, and you might be able to zoom in and see what was there and what wasn't there. So that was really fun to go to there. So again, given my age, I have an extra screen that's bigger, and so then I can zoom in on my computer and really get to what I want to see. And I've started using magnifying glasses on different things too to try and really get in there. So if any of the rest of you are a person of a certain age, those might be extra things you might use. If you don't have good internet or access to bigger screens, you might hit any of the libraries. They all have public computers that you can use. And go through the libraries. A little further here, they also have access to like ancestry.com that you don't have to pay for. So if you don't want to pay the ancestry.com monthly fee or the 1 month, you know, do all your research in a month and then cancel it, the libraries have access to ancestry.com too that you can use. So you know, the next one here is an example of that same map area that I showed you here. The wavy line up there is Midway Parkway. Here's what Ling Bloomston looked like. All this area across the street from me now, I have like 3 buildings and parking lots and dumpsters and garbage trucks that go in and out all the time. But they used to have this one building off of Midway Parkway. And you'll see right here, this is part of Canfield, which was Atlantis on here, but that looks like it's not very wide. And right now, that particular street doesn't have sidewalks or curbs. I don't know why, all the rest of us do, but there's weird peculiarities on different blocks as to what they have and what they don't have. That's kind of neat to look at. Here's Tilden School right there. Here's the Booth Brown home right here. Right here is an area of this house and this house. This is a farmhouse built in 1888. And this house here was built in 1912 by the Hauser family. And they happen to be an African-American or mixed race family that has lived here since right around 1900. And those 2 houses, I wondered why they were there, why they were small, why didn't they look like the other houses? And I looked on the census, and all of a sudden I see there was a Black family living at the end of the block, one of the first families in the neighborhood. So given some of the racial covenant discussions we're having, and then finding, well, right on my block, there was a family who lived there for over 80 years, 3 generations, lived in those 2 houses through various times. So I've been doing a lot of research on that family.
So the Hausers, did they own a lot of property there? And I've been where in Hausers?
They own what was the Ewing lot here, and that's why I'm trying to figure out digging in. And they owned piece 8 of the Child's Edition for a while before it was sold. So I'm tracing some of that piece.
Did they own anything over on the other side of that, like South Como, on Como Avenue?
I don't think so, but there was another Ewing. There was a Thomas Ewing, and then this was an L Ewing. So I'm trying to figure out.
This is Hauser.
Yeah, Hauser, Hauser.
Yeah, did they come, so is where Hauser, is that
No,
2 families or one?
Warehouser is a different family. Yeah, no, totally different.
Totally different. Okay,
So,
thank you.
but that's the piece when you dig into that, is trying to figure out, like looking through clues or looking at ancestry, or do you get a birth date on here? Did you find another name? Trying to match all those things up. Again, not an expert, but I've been doing this just for fun a little while, and I like picking apart clues and digging into stuff. So it's a hobby. Some people like puzzles that you lay out flat. This is the puzzle I like to solve. Right here, this big area that looks like a playground area. This is where it was a children's home was there, or the Union Gospel Mission. But that again was another home for unwed mothers that would come in. I dug through some of their records down at the Historical Society. There's some really interesting things there. I guess there are some apple trees here, again, for some oral history stories of people who live in our area quite a bit. This is right here in Hamlin, and the corner of Como and Hamlin, right there. And all this is the fairground area. So by looking at this from 1940, overhead, this is what the neighborhood would have looked like. Linglum wasn't built out. There might be an awful lot of other farther to the north, open lots where the trees might not be as dense on the canopy because new homes are going in there. There's kind of a cool thing. There's Bison Avenue way up at the top, right there. Right now it's just a hill between 2 streets, but in that picture and from one of the oral histories that we talked to people, he said, yeah, this is roads connected here. And you can see on some other maps where, yep, there were roads, but now it's just a hillside. So they're 2 separate. So, that's just, I don't know, it's geeky fun if you like maps, different things like that. So go ahead and go to the next one. So another place to dig into things is the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO. They have access to lots of information. They do surveys in area. This is from their website. there are 2 or 3, well, this building is on the National Register of Historic Sites and the State Register of Historic Sites. There's several in Como, but Booth Brown Home is on the National Register of Historic Sites. There's another home over not very far from Wheelock Parkway. There's a story in the back there that's on the Register for Historic Sites. And maybe there, if we find other stories, maybe we pursue, should other areas in Como be added to the registry, other homes or little sub-districts. We might have someone come in and talk to us about historic preservation, because there might be long-term big scheme of things. They can historic preservation neighborhoods. They limit some things that you can do in your house, but there's also tax credits for repair. There's different things that go on. So if people are interested, that might be something we put in the back of our heads as something to do as a Como district. So go ahead and go to the next one. Their office back in the 80s has already done like a site survey of, they wandered through the neighborhood and said, hey, these are all homes that seem like they're either unique, old, might have some historic value that we should watch for. So they've done some surveys. So that's what all these little dots represent. And you see the oldest part of the area is really down here in sub-district 4, parts of 3 and 1 over in that area. There's a lot of dots that they surveyed for unique, different homes or historic. You know, this is something maybe worth checking into. This information is already on the District 10 website under the small area plans that are out there. So clicking through our D10 website is how I found this. And it was done, I think, in 2005, or 2015. And then we're about ready to do another one for 2025, like every 10 years or something. We have to go through that. So, but I like this map because it showed, oh, you know, we should really, sometimes this part of the district doesn't get as much, there's just different neighborhood personalities. And so this was all built up there more in, from the 20s going on. A lot of these areas, especially around Victoria and the Frankson addition, all north of Midway Parkway, had racial covenants on it. And it was all built up at the same time, before and after the war, World War II. But down here are the, like, here's your Victorian Warrendale area. But this area, you know, these are working class, the people who worked over at the freight yards at the Como shops, so would live here. So smaller farmhouses and worker housing. And so part of this project too is to get the stories out of people who aren't the governor of the state, or, you know, just get different stories out of everyday people who lived in the neighborhood, worked in the neighborhood, and, you know, spent their lives here. So go ahead to the next one. This is what that document looks like from the historic site surveys. So here was one. This is across the street from Tilden. And they do this, they have this form that's all typed up, and it used to be a Como dental clinic in here. Now they do screen printing up in there. And they go through and they talk about it. Here they talk about describing its background. It might have housed a horse barn, a fire station. There could have been a lot of different things with it. Just talks about the when it was built, how many stories, who owned it, maybe how much it costs. When on the surveys, it has a number here. This is the number that if you contacted the SHPO office and said, I live at this address, it's on the survey, could you send me a copy of that number? They can send that to you through there. Go ahead and go to the next one. I'm transitioning a bit to ancestry.com and online telephone directories. And so I really like comics. I had 2 of them in here, but my kids said, no, that's, you only get one. And so given we're in Minnesota with the Jolly Green Giants, I thought that was cute, and it was just recently in the paper. He did two, like within a month, this past month, he did some fun ones. So city directories, telephone directories, I think most people here might remember what a phone book looked like. They're hard to get now, and it's gonna be really interesting if you think 100 years from now, how will someone research us? You know, will they know where we live? Will they know how we moved around? Will it be a Facebook trail? Will it not be? Or, you know, will it all be public records like, you know, we paid our water bill on time or things like that, or tax records? It'll be interesting to see 100 years from now how that's, how we dig through that. But you can get access to city directories in person at the Historical Society, the Ramsey County Historical Society, which is in the Landmark Building, Landmark Center downtown. St. Paul Public Library, which is the George Latimer Central Library. They also have yearbooks and a lot of other interesting things in St. Paul down there. They have better hours than the other two. So if you wanted to go on Saturday and Sunday, you head down to George Latimer Historical Society and the Landmark Center. Landmark Center is usually only open in the afternoons, like 1 to 4. And the Historical Society is more like Thursday, Friday, Saturday morning. So pick and choose where you want to start your research and spend your time. There's also online, and I didn't know this, but St. Paul had a bunch of directories online, which is kind of cool. And Ancestry.com has city directories online also. It takes a little bit of clicking through their menus to get it and looking around, but you can just look through city directories. Go ahead and go to the next one. Here's a nice picture of what the city directories look like over time. Different, you know, they're all different looks the older they are. There's also this historical information gatherers. There's a company that does this professionally, and they had some really good how to look at city directories and some really professional guides to city directories. You know, just look through if you want another place to get some handout type thing on there. This particular piece, I just took some snips to show you some of the things that they have in the city directories. They have the person by name. They also have business section, and then they go by street name too. So you can see all the businesses of a street. So this happens to be 1948, and this is Como Avenue between Arona and down here with Snelling. And so some of the things that we've been, again, with the oral history interviews we were doing, a lot of people talked about Haggerty's Dairy Store that was at 1556. The A&W root beer stand was also, what was the name of that? Sugar Dan's, yep. So that was at 1537, and there's a picture back there of Sugar Dan's, and the Midtown Theater was there, and it looks like this is an example too of the theater, and then they had dentists upstairs and physicians, or because they had some extra office space upstairs in their building. There is Harold Danberg's grocery store. So just seeing there's service stations, dentists. So all along a shoe repair down here, meat place, tool and die company, manufacturing. So to see all the bike shop, I thought was cool too. So all along Como in one block, these are on both sides. So Como and Snelling is very different now because they raised and elevated the Snelling Avenue over Como, but before it used to be flat, and you know that would be another good story if anyone's into public works and wants to check out with them. When did it get raised? How did the buildings move? You know, what had to be moved? What torn down? I think those things are interesting. So I shared with this one. If you want to go to the next page, I shared a couple other things here too. This one, they give a story too about, at the very beginning of many of the books, they say, this is what happened in 1939. and they tell you kind of what's going on, what the industry is, what was going on. So the first pages give kind of a little snapshot of the history at that point in time. Because as you all know, political history, economic history dictates when your house was built. Oh, we're in a recession, there are no houses built. Oh, we're in a boom spurt, then houses are being built. So a lot of the economic times also, you can get flavors and feels from it, from reading the beginning of it. This one I did, there's Atlantis from Hamlin to Snelling, so it gives you the street. So I showed you the other map that had Atlantis, but right now that street is named Canfield. But here are all the different people who lived on it in 1939. So if you're looking for someone, maybe you could, research some of these people or run across the name of something. But I just thought it was interesting to find, these different names going through here. I ran across that 1375 Dudley Johnson. That gentleman was also an African-American who lived on Atlantis. His house was set back from Midway Parkway. The address changed. They had been Midway Parkway at one point in time, and then it changed to Atlantis. His lot got split. Another house got built on it in 1959. He was a single gentleman. His house is still standing there, and is on Atlantis and on Canfield. So by tracing the address, I got a name, then I could look at what Mr. Dudley was doing and look at census records at that area to see who his neighbors were, and was digging into, I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool, just from a few clicks on different documents. But again, those are rabbit holes, so if you are a focused person, so this is, if you like to meander, it's really fun. I gave this other one, I'll go back one. Sorry. Oh, yeah.
There's only market gardeners along.
Yeah.
And what that tells you is before the neighborhood was fully built out residentially, there was a lot of small scale farming going on.
And Darlene can speak a lot to that because that's what her family farm was truck farms. But yeah, that's exactly why I put this on here, was because look at all the florists and gardeners all along. This is Larpenter Avenue, Cleveland intersection, Snelling intersection. And I just thought that was like really interesting because when we moved here, the Cub Foods, that was the Rainbow, that was the old theater. There were, lots and lots of garden shops all along here. Hermes, there were big spaces of it. So again, proving or trying to explain to grandkids or high school kids or whatever, that this whole area was not built up. There were not apartment buildings here. This is farmland. This is where people grew their vegetables and took them into the city. And Darlene's story.
All those market gardens, so those are all the land that's taken by them there.
Yeah, different.
One of those is my grandfather,
See, there you go. So, and adding to that, which one's your grandfather?
John Keller.
Keller on there?
Yeah,
See, so when do you want to write your story?
So those now become the fields of the university.
Yeah, yeah. And then
and
they were stolen by them.
See, those are really important stories because they even tie into Rondo and 94. All these things, eminent domain, where did they put their, why did the big powerful people taking land? Those are stories that you always get the winners write history. So yes, we have a great institution, but the person who was impacted by that, let's hear their story. So yes, that would be great. And there's plenty of people here with good experience that can help just either proofread things or start. Darlene had a story and we said, can you talk about this? Can we split it into 2 parts? And now I'm making her, I'm asking her night to write something because we did share it to some of the history groups in St. Paul and people wrote back, oh, he was my teacher, he was this, or he was a gym instructor. And so I think we should have a story written about her dad then. on there, so, you know, branching out. So some of these stories being written are projecting onto other people, or, you know, they're triggering other stories from other people. So we can go to the next one. One last one. This is my Hauser family that I've been looking at. And this also helped me try and find out other people in the Hauser family, because by the last name Hauser, found out that Jackson, the first one was a watchman here. He lived in Albany near the corner of Pascal Avenue. So he didn't have an address yet. They hadn't gotten that far. And this one is 1903. So we have them having land there. This is what like a page would look like online, and then you can zoom in on Ancestry. And then you can also find other people that were like cooks up there, or right here, I happen to know that Nobles is his grandson. And they went to the school of which is, I think, the School of Agriculture. But he lived at the same address as Jackson, but his brother up here, right down there, Clarkson, his brother lived at Thomas Avenue, and he also went to the School of Agriculture, which I think might have been the U of M campus. They were very, very bright family, very educated, and that Clarkson, Wilbur Clarkson ended up being a teacher down in Illinois or in Kentucky, and every year go back and forth from other census stuff I could find. But here, you know, I could connect, why is he living on Thomas Avenue when his dad and his brother are living on over here on Hamlin or on Pascal and Albany. So, and sometimes you can maybe see if there's other brothers, relatives, uncles, just by the last name on there. Go ahead and go to the next one. And then here I added this, I found this advertisement in 1904 for a Hoyt. Before it was just a street, he had a whole farm area that he was doing, but you take the Como interurban to Hamlin and 1/2 mile north to get to it. And this would have been the corner of Hamlin and Hoyt, right across diagonal from Chelsea Heights. They also had the Dual City Blue Book. So if you were a blue blood in Minneapolis or St. Paul, they had a special directory for you. So you can look through these, and these are online on the city of St. Paul, and I didn't know about that until I saw an advertisement going through. So again, drilling, and that's, I think the blue book was because of that blue blood, but I'm making that assumption. But it really flows for a nice story there. So, so yeah, so there's limited people there, and go ahead and go down. And then there's also institutions and clubs that are listed in sections, and I thought these were really fun. Here's the Salvation Army Blue Crown Home. It's listed there. Here is the Women's Christian Home. That's the one that's on the corner of Hamlin near Albany. So that was the one that burned down in 1961, but that was considered asylums, hospitals, and homes. So there are other ways, like if you're looking at clubs, the Dale Street Infirmary, a city smallpox hospital. And I'm like, wow, okay. You know, that's kind of interesting. And that was near the city limits. So I'm not quite sure what part of Dale it could be, but it could be at Dale in Maryland. But there's a gun club right at Dale in Maryland. And they met each second and fourth Sundays, and the president was Alvin Rowe. So I just thought that was cool, clubs and, you know, what was going on at the time. So this is like the Facebook of 1990. All right. So moving still with the, and again, you can see those in person at the Historical Society. They have about 6 or 7 of them at the Ramsey County Library, just random years on a shelf in the reference area if you want to take a peek first. But Minnesota Historical Society has a big collection. So does the St. Paul Public Library and the Ramsey
How
County.
far back do they go?
I'm not sure. Marcia, do you know how far back the city directories go?
How far back they actually go.
Probably into the
17,
into the 1850s, because that's when we became a state and things like that. And I found some of the really old ones online. at the St. Paul Public Library. So you can keep them the oldest ones. Because I remember they only had like 9,000 people in all of St. Paul or something.
I think it was back in 1857.
Yep.
The first year, I think, is just businesses, but after that,
Okay.
it's by individuals.
Perfect, and it, ties with statehood, so again, going back to like fourth grade, when you learned about the state of Minnesota history. Here's where it started up, and you can decide and see who was included, who wasn't included. That's another, always like, who's missing from these things. I like to look at, so they also have a digital newspaper hub. And so you can go out there, search the newspaper, go ahead and click it there. And again, if you like to, Google Minnesota Historical Society, start going through their webpage. And so go ahead and go to the next. Come up something like this. You can pull in there. I did Priscilla Libby. I put her Ramsey County, and I got a couple articles from her in the Daily Globe. Go ahead and go to the next one. This is, she got burgled. So this is really interesting. Someone tried to forge a check and then copied it. And so here's a little article on that and what happened to him and his day in court. So, again, I was just trying to do an example and I pulled up a person's name. And there's also some translation stuff that you can use some of their tools and you can cut it and it'll give you a typed version. So if you want to put in another document, I tend to be a snip person and then I put it in a Word document, then I can look at it. But you can enlarge it really big and read sections. So anyway, that was fun for me to see that she helped or had a boarding house through part of this. And then Child actually lived in her boarding house because it's like, how did they get connected? How did she sell her land to him? Anyway, that was I'm going down that. So go ahead and go there. Here is another one of that house I told you on Hamlin and Hoyt. This is Nellie Barnes. So I put, for this one, I put the address in before I did this, and I got a Swedish newspaper popped up. And then they, on Google Translate, there's a button on the previous one, you can see the button Google Translate. So here was, they thought it was Danish and there were Swedish, and then it translates it for you. So you don't have to read Swedish, you don't have to read German. Google did that all for you, and you can get it, it might not be perfect, but you can get enough information. And it told what she did. She treated people here. She's an eye specialist going through here, U of M. And she's a female doctor. And there was part of it where it did have the address of that house. That's how I got through to this. I just didn't put that in the snip because of the translate. But the address of the house got me to a Swedish newspaper because it said her name and the address of the house. And then I did the translate and now found a huge, really good story about her. That would be great for anyone's History Day project. If you have kids or grandkids or know someone, she would be really good if they're interested in medicine and one of the first women to have a medical license in Minnesota. So go ahead and go to the next one. Again, they have research too. They have photography that you can get at their library. So this one, I looked at their collections online, did a search for Tilden School. They have some pictures. Here's a picture. So again, clicking, finding, getting the right word and how to dig into that. So go ahead and go to the next one. Another one I found they had is probate. So again, in the Minnesota Historical Society, there's probate information, case files, wills. I haven't dug a lot in this one, but there might be, if you get a few names on your house record, you might look at probate to see why they willed them. Were they related? Did they just sell it? That could be another place to dig through. Go ahead and go to the next one. The Bureau of Land Management, one of the people who sent me some information on this, I can't remember their name right now, but they told me about this website, and this goes back to land warranty deeds. Very easy to move around this one. You put in your location. This is where you put in township and range that you can get on the maps. Go ahead and go to the next one. And then it popped up, so here's my William Marshall right there. Here was, his land deed he got from a military warrant. So if you served in the military, they may have granted you land for your service. And it was very easy to click around and go see different things. And then you could see who, I think this Enoch Florence willed it or gave it to William Marshall. So you see some transfers of land going through there where he was also in real estate. So you saw certain people in real estate getting big pieces of tracts of land through there. But those are kind of fun to see. Go ahead and go to the next one. Here's another one too on Indian treaties. We happen to have two sessions of land for two different treaties. And this goes right through Como Park. And I zoomed in on this because I'm like, why was that point significant? And why was that point significant? Why did they pivot at that point? You know, was there something there, a big treaty, was some significant marker in the treaty that allowed them to do something? So, you know, have to dig into that, but I'm wondering why is that, you know, why did it bend there? So you can look at treaty information to explore that also. Go ahead and go next. And then I brought a couple on the back table, but here's some other resources about this area that you can look at. David Lanegren of McAllister has written 2 books about the districts and area here. The Street Where You Live. That's the book that by Donald Epson, tracing those Atlantis to Canfield. You look up your street name, you find the history of it. He did all that work for us. You can get that at the library, or you know, if you want to buy your own copy. I have my own. There's a sample back there. We have Mr. Bergentheim, who wrote the history of this area, nice little stories. So I love his idea of putting stories together in a book. Maybe if we have people submitting their stories, we have the Know Your Como, but you know, that's an idea of community input. He also wrote the Wing It about the first airport in Minnesota or St. Paul, but that was right at the corner of Hamlin and Hoyt to Larpenteur and Snelling. That whole area was an airport, and then old history of St. Paul. There's several books on those. And I think the last one after that, oh, let's go back one. There's also Historic St. Paul has been doing some of this story in other parts of the city. So I'm hoping at some point in time we add our stories to Historic St. Paul. And then there was also a WW Life map that people are putting memories and history on if they want. That's kind of like a Facebook, you know, it's more casual. There is going to be a presentation on Tuesday down at the Landmark Center for historic, the day St. Paul died, or the year St. Paul died, 1978. Someone had taken a lot of pictures that David Lanegren is going to be at the Landmark Center from like 12. They're doing a presentation from 12 to 1 or something down there, but that might be if you want to do a field trip, go listen to a presentation and go hang out down there. And now we can go to the last one. And thank you all for attending. These are some folks who helped put all this stuff together over the last 6 months, and up for questions.
You want to find out about events that happen on your street? I would think it'd be like noteworthy, maybe. So that would be searching up a newspaper.
Yeah,
Like the bicentennial wagon train that
went through or something. Yeah, that's the newspaper searching. We have online, like starting at the Park Bugle. They go back to like 1974 or 73 online, and you can page through those. They don't have the OCR on that. Monitor has some online, and Monitor, it's all on microfiche for the Como Monitor down at the Historical Society. all of like the St. Pioneer Press. Some of the really old ones you can get online, but some of the newer stuff is you gotta page through, microfilm for, the newspapers that way. So it's a little harder in some St. Paul things, but a lot of times you can go to that newspaper hub, put in what you're interested in, maybe you find it in the Star Tribune there, and then you have a date or you have something, and then you can, look at it, St. Paul paper. Like that, so I mean, but that takes a lot of time. Marcia, do you want to add
I was
anything?
just in the Minnesota Historical Society Library, it's never gone, it's available, I've got the hours here, Thursdays 1 to 4, and Fridays and Saturdays 10 to 4. You can make a reservation in advance if you want to do some specific work in the library, or you can also just come in. But in terms of photographs, all the photographs in the society are not scanned and available online. And so when you go, you have a better chance of finding things, and most of the photographs that are in archival collections say that Peter Johnson Family Archives has a couple boxes of, well, all the photos in there are probably are not scanned. So if you have to search and you run into it, maybe you will hold your property and have an archive collection at every test that you might really score. So you, as the Laura said, you have to just keep digging, and the hints, the group just keep coming.
There, some people might know there's an old St. Paul, Minnesota Facebook group. And people post all sorts of reminiscences from their particular families, and also some more general.
Yep, there's actually several, there's like old St. Paul, all in caps, and then there's old St. Paul, not all in caps. And then there's the Como neighborhood friends, and then there's several. So I have I posted this thing on all those that I could find that I was members of, but yeah. And I have my own little ooh, they did a story that's in this area, then I save that story so I can go back and dig through my Facebook to maybe add it or print it or whatever.
Yeah, you can probably search for Como Park and.
Yep. Yeah, and a lot of things, when you do Como Park, it's gonna go right to the park.
Yeah.
So it's that's where some going down the street and, oh, that house is interesting, so writing the street address, or, that might be ways to dig. And through the beginning of this, property tax records, you can get ages of homes and things like that. There might be other clues and names and things like that. That's all public records, so.
There's one site, you had it on here, Laura, called Life Map. It's LYFMAP. You can just Google that. But that site is exceptionally useful if you want to look up the history of your house. Actually, it's kind of creepy. But I'll pick on my friend here. I can go into her house and see it runs from a visualization of a photograph. And I can pick up my neighbor, and I can look at my neighbor, and I'll give the history of that house. I think probably every time it's sold, and it comes from Ramsey County, but it not only gives the time that it was sold, going back to all the original owners, but it also tells what that person did most of the time. So I can look at my neighbors and I can look at what their jobs were. And it's pretty accurate. Sometimes it skips some people for some reason. I'm not in there they don't know where. I must have been a covert person or something. But it is incredible. It's easy to use. It's free. And it's kind of strange because the information must come from Ramsey County.
Some, and I think it's first too, you can enter stuff, and it all depends on. Because I looked up a few and some I didn't find anything, others I found a lot, so. I also want to thank Jim for bringing in some of his collection of maps here, so, that was the last information I had. I want to let you, you can check out some of the things we have in the back, look through the map, see if you find your house, and thanks again for coming, and hopefully you can write a story and share it with Know Your Home.
And if you're interested, we got some, forms to fill out if you want to be encouraged, also.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, shoot.